like a lot of new therapists, I didn't think that I was at risk of burnout. And so at the very beginning of my career, I just wasn't thinking about needing to employ strategies to avoid burnout, right? I just thought, I love it. I want to do it. It's going to be great. It's my dream job and it'll be fine, right? Welcome to the Alchemy Project Podcast, Episode 3. This is where we explore the space where work meets life. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience and one of the ways that I have avoided burnout in a career that actually has a pretty high rate of burnout. So I've been a therapist for about 30 years now, and the most common question that I get asked by far is, how do you avoid burnout? This just happened to me yesterday. I was talking with someone and they said, how do you avoid burnout? I can't imagine being a therapist because you spend all day, every day, talking with people who are dealing with maybe their biggest challenges and sharing things that are heartbreaking and frustrating to bear witness to. And so how do you sustain that, right? So that's the most common question that I get as a therapist. And it's a reasonable question because people are right. The job is such that you basically are inviting people to engage with you in their most challenged moments, with their most challenging issues, right? And in fact, if you look at it, a lot of therapists burn out in the first year of therapy. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people go to the trouble to get their bachelor's degree and then get their master's degree and then get some sort of clinical placement in order to get their clinical hours to become a therapist. So it's a pretty big commitment of time and energy on your career path if you're going to try to be a therapist. And it's unfortunate for a lot of people that they go to all that expense and trouble and then find that they're not able to sustain it. But here's one way, and I think for me, probably the most important way that I have avoided having burnout in my career. And it's actually something that I didn't originally think of so much for myself because, like a lot of new therapists, I didn't think that I was at risk of burnout. And so at the very beginning of my career, I just wasn't thinking about needing to employ strategies to avoid burnout, right? I just thought, I love it. I want to do it. It's going to be great. It's my dream job and it'll be fine, right? But here's how I came to this technique, which has helped me and I think some other people that I've worked with. Not long into my career, actually pretty shortly after I became a therapist, and even before I was a full clinical independent therapist, I had this job where I was supervising master's students, okay? And later, after I got my full clinical credential, I was supervising new therapists. And I did that for a number of years, both inside an agency and also independently, just providing supervision for people who needed supervision. So basically, when you're going through internships or when you're a new therapist, part of the requirement is that you have a supervisor, a clinical supervisor, and that clinical supervisor is going to have ongoing engagement with you and do case reviews of your work and nurture you in your development of your skills as a therapist and also just kind of your posture and orientation toward the career. So that was a role that I played for many years, actually, and starting fairly early on in my career. So one of the things that I thought of right at the beginning of becoming a supervisor for new therapists and for master's students doing their internships is in my regular meetings with my mentees, I would ask them to do two things. One time a week, they had to write a short journal entry. It could be a paragraph, it didn't have to be a big essay. But I wanted them to write a short journal entry about something during that week of work with clients or the job in general that they found challenging. And I just wanted them to name what was it that challenged them? Why did they think it was challenging? How did they react to it? What are their thoughts about dealing with that particular type of challenge in general? Okay, so that was the guide for what is something that was challenging this week. But I also asked them to write a second journal entry, and that was, what is something that is enlivening to me? What is something about my work or a particular case that I'm working in that I found enlivening? And I invited my students to be fairly open and broad in their self-appraisal with this, to be able to name anything. What's one thing that was challenging? What's one thing that was enlivening? And every week they had to write this one journal entry. And often I would work with students either over a semester for the master's students, or I would work with supervisees sometimes for like a year. And so we would have many of these regular weekly meetings where we would review what they were writing in these journal entries, among other things that we did in the supervision. And my purpose was, number one, to teach people to have an ongoing awareness of challenges, because if you're not attending to how you're experiencing challenges and how you're coping with them, reacting to them, reworking how you're dealing with whatever the particular thing is. If you don't have an ongoing dynamic self-awareness feedback loop, then it really is this vague thing that, oh, I'm just withstanding a wall of crap every day. Work has challenges. Everybody's work has challenges of different sorts, right? But if you just lump it into this vague challenge pile, then it's really not specific enough for you to potentially catch some important details of why something is challenging to you, how you're reacting to it, and what opportunities might exist for you to rework it, okay? Number two, the reason I asked people to write the second entry about what is enlivening is, if you don't identify and deepen your relationship with the things that are enlivening about your work will lack meaning. Your work will lack reward. Your overall relationship with your work might not be bolstered by the parts that are actually the reasons that you chose to do what you're doing, or the reasons that you're choosing to continue doing what you're doing, or even what are your goals for yourself and for your life through your work, right? We discount the positive when we're stressed. And so my rationale for asking people to explicitly identify something that is enlivening and what's their relationship with that enlivening element of their work was that I think sometimes we have to rationally correct for the natural bias of our brain to discount the positive. This has been very well demonstrated in cognitive neuroscience, that when we experience something negative and something positive, our brains actually tend to discount the positive and increase our focus on the negative. And this is a leftover artifact of evolution, right? If you're about to get eaten by a bear, the negative thing, you're not going to stop and smell the roses in the middle of a bear attack, right? So our brain is wired under stress, when we're in danger, that we emphasize the negative and we discount the positive, right? So being a therapist is a stressful job. Being a new therapist is a particularly stressful situation. And so cognitive neuroscience would tell us that it would be easy to not focus as much on the positive as the negative. And I think we need that. So when I incorporated this technique with my supervisees, I also adopted it as my own posture toward my career, right? So for me, I'm 3 decades into my career, and I don't sit down and do a journal entry weekly, but it is something that I have explicitly done consciously in my mind of regularly checking in. What is it about this case? What it is it about that interaction with that patient? Or what is it about my job that I find challenging? Because I need to be aware with enough specificity in order to see how that's affecting me, see how I'm relating to it, and potentially see what options I have of improving it, right? I also, conversely, do the positive thing because I want to have a sustainable career, which I have, okay? The reason I'm 3 decades into this is that I have not burned out, right? Um, this is one of the reasons that I haven't burned out is that I not only dealt with the parts of my work that are challenging to me, but I've also crafted a relationship with my work so that the positive things are fully in play for me. There are things about being a therapist that are profoundly enlivening for me, and I don't want those to just be tacit things that happen to be there. And yes, it's nice. I want to work with those things consciously and proactively so that the meaningful part of my work, the rewarding part of my work, is in play as much as it can be. And if it's not in play, I need to do something to change it, right? But that's something that's been something I shared with many of my supervisees over the years. It's something that has affected me, and I'm sharing it in this podcast episode because whatever the type of work, I'm not talking to you as a therapist because I don't assume everybody watching this video is dealing with the particular challenges of being a therapist, but all of us have challenges in our work. You do, I do, everybody does. It's also true that things are enlivening. And I know some of you watching this might poo poo this idea and say, well, that's great if you're choosing your dream career and pursuing it, but I'm stuck in this job that I don't think inherently has a lot of meaning. Same thing applies. You are going through your life right now. You are doing some type or types of work. There are challenges. But if we make a pie chart, it's not 100% challenge. It's just not. And this is for anybody I talk to. I talk to lots of people about burnout and work stress and things like that. The reality is there are things in your life, if not your work, that are enlivening to you. And the enlivening parts of your life counterbalance the challenging parts of your life. And you not only need to focus on the challenges, fight off the bear, figure out how to cope, but you also need to pursue meaning because the reality is the same amount of actual challenge objectively will land on two different people depending on how much meaning that person is deriving from their life, okay? You could do a really, really hard job that is very meaningful and not burn out, whereas the person next to you would be doing half as much work but not finding it meaningful, and they'll burn out, okay? So we need to have a relationship with our life, with our work that is meaningful in order for us to thrive, in order for us to cope with the challenges, and in order for us to do the long path in a sustainable way, all right? So that's my idea about it. So I hope that this is helpful for you. If you like this kind of content, hit the like button below and please subscribe to the channel. If you know somebody who would benefit from this video, then please share it with them and stay tuned for more content.